Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the July Planning Commission Agenda Review Meeting. We have a new commissioner this month, Miles Biggs, so we welcome you, Miles. I've known Miles for a good many years. Reflective of my age, he graduated with my daughter in high school, so he's a very talented young man. I know that he'll make some really good contributions to the overall group here. And Miles, if you want to say a hello and a word, you're invited to do so.
Sure. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody. Excited to be here. There's a full agenda, so a little bit of baptism by fire. But yeah, thanks for helping me get up to speed and kind of learning the ropes. But excited to contribute to the group here.
Thank you. This time, I'll turn it over to Director Brooks.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. Let's give a few updates on what staff has been working on. Advanced Knox is continuing to move ahead towards the adoption process. The project team has been working with the consultant on the draft plan and continuing to refine that future land use map. And so we are excited to be compiling this information, and we'll be sharing it out with you very soon in the coming months. So stay tuned for more on that. The TPO Executive Board adopted the Regional Roadway Safety Action Plan at the end of June. This plan will position the region to apply for federal funding, and it identifies changes that can be made right away to save lives and prevent serious injuries on our roadways. And the full plan is available at the knoxtpo.org/safety if you're interested in taking a look at that. The search for replacement for our current transportation planning manager is currently underway. I'm sad to say Jeff Welch is retiring in less than 40 days, so we hope to begin reviewing candidates by the end of this month. We renewed our contract for services with the Knoxville Chamber, continuing our work to provide design consultation as well as GIS mapping tools for the business park segment of the Chamber website. And we are continuing to share the talents and skills of our web and GIS team with the Development Corporation. We've been working with the Chamber for several years to help them continue to build out their economic development and industrial recruitment devices to investment prospects nationally and internationally. That's all I have for updates. I'm going to turn it over now if Aubrey is ready. She's going to give a presentation on the 2022 Development Activity Report, which you have in front of you. And I also just want to make note that as we presented last month on the annual report, but you now have a printed copy of basically all the information that was presented to you last month. All right, I'll turn it over to Aubrey.
Thanks, Amy. For the new commissioner, I'm Aubrey Weiland. I would come up here to teach you guys about all the different development trends and population trends. I'm typically the data person, so you get used to seeing me around here. Today I'm going to talk to you about the 2022 Development Activity Report. This is an annually updated report on multiple indicators related to development in Knox County throughout the 2022 calendar year. We produce an update on this report every spring, and we have been doing so since the 80s. These annual updates allow us to track trends as they arise and keep an eye on what specific changes are coming to communities. So to start off, these are the three sources that we use to discuss development in this report. We use building permits, rezonings, and subdivisions. Rezonings and subdivisions are handled by planning, and building permits come to us from the county, city, and town of Farragut. Building permits tell us what is being built and completed right now, whereas rezonings and subdivisions give us an idea of what is coming in the near future. Some general trends for 2022. Everything was higher in 2022 than 2018, except for new lots from non-residential subdivisions, and acres rezoned for residential uses, and new lots from residential subdivisions were both only slightly higher than in 2018. While I talk about this report, I'm going to reference the 12 planning sectors. Here are some things that I anticipate when I get this data every year, and some things that locals have probably come to expect. So let's keep them in mind during this presentation and see if those expectations were met at the end of the presentation. Northwest County is going to have, gosh, there's something going on with my computer. There we go. Northwest County is going to have the most of a lot of things. They've been at the top for a while. Southwest County is also going to get an honorable mention, sort of, mostly in residential development. These two sometimes switch places at the top. All the other county sectors will have some new neighborhoods, but overall they won't get as much development as those that I just mentioned. And Central City has been trending upwards after a huge loss in population in the previous decades. Both residential and non-residential permits were up from 2018. Southwest County actually had the highest with 1,062 new units, just barely beating Northwest County. Like I said, Southwest and Northwest County sometimes take turns in the lead. And South City was the lowest with just 35 new units. Most of the permits were for residential units, so we see pretty much the same pattern looking at only residential units. We report residential units in 4 types of structure: single-family detached, multifamily, mobile homes, and single-family attached. One trend that's cropped up in recent years is a surge in multifamily housing, including outside Knoxville city limits, which was not the case a decade ago, either before or after the Great Recession. In 2022, there were more multifamily units permitted than single-family detached houses. Pictured are the Lakemore Station apartments, which recently got a spotlight in the news because UT just made a deal with them to claim all 240 units for student housing. Northwest County had the most non-residential new developments at 41, with a near equal mix of commercial, industrial, and institutional uses. South City once again had the least. And this photo isn't actually a building activity photo because it was a renovation, but it is exciting to see the progress being done at Lakeshore Park. In this residential building activity map, you can see that a lot of the smaller developments are around the city core, and a lot of larger developments are mostly in the county. However, there are a few larger clusters in the city that could be apartments. And the Northwest and Southwest County sectors visibly have the most of the larger developments. We'd like to take a look at 10-year trends in this report. This one is all the new units permitted in the county in the past 10 years, split into residential and non-residential. From 2013 to 2022, Northwest County alone gained about 8,500 new residential units, which is the highest of all the sectors. And that's more than a quarter of all the new residential units in the county in that same time period, which is only about 31,000. The next highest was Southwest County, which was significantly lower at about 6,000. In that same time period, a 5-year moving average reveals an upward trend. For this analysis, the 5-year trend was the 4 years preceding and the year in question. Moving on to the value of all this construction. I think we're all pretty aware that everything got very expensive in the past 2 years, and construction was certainly not excluded from that. In 2022, $1.1 billion were spent on new construction alone in Knox County. And compared to renovations, they spent about $350 million on major renovations. I say major because we read a lot of news saying that everyone's going to be renovating their houses in 2022 because they couldn't afford to move. If that happened, it wasn't the kind of major renovations that you need a permit for, like a complete bathroom remodel or an addition. And we don't get numbers on how many people painted their houses. But we can see that it was at least more expensive to renovate. Both residential and non-residential rezoning acreage was up from 2018. However, residential rezonings were less significant. The acreage of all rezonings was highest in Northwest County, and it was lowest in West City. The total number of rezonings was also highest in Northwest County and lowest in the West City, or lowest also in the South City. Interestingly, the acres of agricultural zone land converted by rezoning was lower than it had been in a few years in the past decade. Agriculturally zoned land is commonly rezoned for detached single-family housing, so we keep an eye on that. Residential subdivisions are up from 2018, but non-residential are way down. For context, the highest number of new lots created by non-residential subdivisions in the past 10 years was 74 lots, and that was in 2016. New lots created is used in our new school enrollment projection model, and the school board uses the development activity report to prepare for future student enrollment. Northwest County also had the most subdivisions and the most lots created by those subdivisions. And finally, you can also see that the most subdivisions are in the Northwest and Southwest County sectors. So we could talk about whether those local expectations were met. Northwest County obviously was a star of pretty much every chart that I showed. Southwest County had the most new units, so it deserves that honorable mention, even though it didn't really stand out in the rezonings or subdivisions. All the other county sectors did stand out over the city sectors. They are larger in land area, so that does make a lot of sense. And finally, Central City did stand out in new units permitted and in rezonings. And that's the last of my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Aubrey.
There you go.
There we go. All right. Hi, I'm Jessie Hillman, Principal Planner for Planning. First item is agenda item number 5, case 6E23RZ. This is a 0.67 acre property on Chickamauga Avenue, which is a local street. The rezoning request is to go from RN2, single-family residential neighborhood, to RN4, general residential neighborhood, and the infill housing overlay would be retained. The property is within the boundaries of the Oakwood Lincoln Park Neighborhood Association. It's located east of 275 and south of Sharps Ridge Veterans Memorial Park. This property is in an area that's predominantly RN2, though it is adjacent to an RN5 zone parcel to the east with 6 units. There are also 2 RN5 apartment communities nearby to the west. The land use classification is traditional neighborhood development, which permits consideration of RN4 zoning. And this is the aerial where you can see there's an existing single-family dwelling on this lot that is now large. There's a plat that's in process that combined these 2 lots into one. The Oakwood Lincoln Park Neighborhood Plan, adopted in 2006, describes how apartments should be designed in similar proportions to architectural features of historic houses in the neighborhood. This sentiment is reflected in the infill housing overlay that was added for this area in 2007, which describes how multi-unit housing should maintain the architectural scale, massing, and rhythm of the block and locate parking in the rear. So that does provide protections in terms of neighborhood character. This open property is in an area, so we are recommending approval. This open property is in an area where there is precedent for multifamily development. Should such development occur, it would be assessed by the Design Review Board for compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood character. This property is located near 2 CAT bus stops and the pending CAT reimagined bus routes do show access being maintained here and potentially increased with the bus line going through this section of Chickamauga. It's also near the Kelly Volunteer Academy High School and a trailhead for the Sharps Ridge Trails to the northwest. So for these reasons, we are recommending approval. I'm happy to answer any questions. Moving on to item number 9, 7D23RZ, 7A23PA, 7A23SP. This is a city rezoning and plan amendment. It's a 1.11 acre parcel on Chapman Highway, a major arterial street. The request is to go from RN1, single-family residential neighborhood with low-density residential land use classification, to CH2, highway commercial with general commercial land use classification. The southeast portion of this parcel is within the hillside protection overlay, and this would be retained. The property is adjacent to RN1 zoning with a single-family dwelling directly to the west. There is county agricultural and general residential zoning to the south, separated by a right-of-way remnant from the old Smoky Mountain Railroad. The requested CH2 zoning does exist nearby to the west and along Chapman Highway along the corridor. However, you can see with the existing land use that much of that CH2 zoning is vacant or has a less intensive use on it. The residential area to the west and south is predominantly single-family residential or rural residential. The sector plan and the one-year plan, what we're seeing is the sector plan, but the land use classifications are the same. They consistently classify this southern part of Chapman Highway as low-density residential to guide future land use. So general commercial would be a spot here on this side of Chapman. And in this aerial, you can see that this is a forested parcel. About 2,000 square feet of the southeast portion of it has a slope of 25% or greater. The property is located on a significant bend of Chapman Highway where there is no median, turn lane, or shoulder on the south side. This intensive zoning request, so we're recommending denial of the plan amendment and zoning. This intensive zoning request is not compatible with the adjacent low-density residential environment. Although there is significant CH2 zoning in this area, much of it is vacant or does not meet its design capacity, like the big box retail center to the northwest. So these conditions don't warrant an expansion of commercial zoning to this location. This property is also located at a significant curve of Chapman Highway, which could make adequate site distance a challenge. The Chapman Highway Corridor Study recommends adding turn lanes, median, and shoulders as needed, and these kinds of improvements have not occurred here, nor are there known plans to do so. Commercial zoning would likely increase the frequency of turning traffic, which could be a safety issue here. Office zoning was discussed with the applicant as a potential alternative, but retail uses were being considered here, which is not permitted in the office district. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay. Item number 16, 7P23RZ, 7C23PA, 7D23SP. This is a city rezoning and plan amendment. It's a 4.88 acre parcel on Lonis Drive, a major collector street north of I-40. The request is to go from RN1, single-family residential neighborhood, with the LDR, low-density residential land use classification, to RN3, general residential neighborhood, to MDR, which is medium-density residential land use classification, not low. The rear portion of this parcel is in the hillside protection overlay, which would be retained. This is an area with a wide range of residential zoning districts from RN1 to RN6. There is an expansive apartment development zoned RN5 adjacent to the west, and a single-family RN1 neighborhood adjacent to the east. The land use classification is LDR, and the MDR classification is neighboring the parcel to the west and south. This is a large wooded parcel with a single-family home on it currently. The existing land use is classified as rural residential, which is an outlier in this area with more intensive residential densities surrounding. The rear 1.91 acres of the parcel are within the hillside protection area, and the slope analysis provides a disturbance budget of 1.11 acres. As you can see, there are a wide range of housing forms provided in this area, from apartments to townhomes to single-family residences. We're recommending approval of RN3 and MDR. It provides a transition of residential intensity from the RN5 district to the west to the RN1 district to the east, and there is RN3 zoning directly across Lonas Drive. Consideration of more residential density here is also supported by the property's close proximity to job centers in the form of several medical office parks to the south, as well as schools like Pond Gap Elementary and South College to the south and east respectively. So for these reasons, we're recommending approval. Happy to answer any questions.
I've got a quick question. So if RN3 were to allow townhomes in there, could the townhomes be oriented to go long ways? Does that make sense?
If it was on a shared lot, yes.
So then the rear setback would be the west, the east side, then, if they oriented them that way?
Let me pull up the dimensional standards. So you're asking if the orientation was faced internally,
Yeah.
kind of like a courtyard type setting? And so the rear setbacks would then apply along the sides?
I guess how close would those townhomes be to, theoretical townhomes be to that single-family residential neighborhood to the east?
Yeah, I think the way this has been interpreted in the past is that you would just look at it as one giant lot. So the front lot line is along Lonas. The rear lot line is parallel to that furthest back, and the side lot lines are perpendicular to Lonas.
Okay. So then they couldn't orient it, townhomes going down the lot, the long way of that lot?
They
Or they could, but
they
it would...
could, yeah. But, yeah, if they put them on lots, then if each townhouse is on its own individual lot, then the rear setback for those
Okay.
individuals would still be, I guess, to the
There'd be a
east
concept for
side.
Thank you, Jesse. As this gets transitioned over to Michelle, I just want to make a note that item number 30, the applicant has submitted a request to withdraw. So unless the commissioners would like to review it, we will just move on to item number 33.
Okay, so this is a request to rezone a portion of the subject property from PR with up to 12 dwelling units an acre to CA. Only the front corner is included in the request. This parcel has dual zoning with the main body of the parcel zone CA and both a small portion on the front southwest corner of the parcel and a larger piece in the rear zone PR with up to 12 dwelling units per acre. As a reminder, the CA is intended to provide general retail business and services, but not manufacturing or processing materials. And the surrounding area does include retail and business and services, so this zone is appropriate for this area. The rest of the parcel's frontage is already zone CA, so approval of this request would make the front of the property consistent. This area does have a history of rezonings to commercial zones since the late 1990s, particularly at this corner. This section of the Asheville Highway is predominantly commercially zoned. Looking at the sector plan, this parcel is designated CC for community commercial. Rezonings for these properties predate the sector plan, but the plan never designated the residential corner as a commercial land use, recognized it as that CC. That land use lists the CA zone as one to consider, and it calls for retail and service-oriented development, which is consistent with the CA zone description. Office and commercial zoning along Asheville Highway is supported by the East City Sector Plan. According to the plan, survey results stemming from the public participation process revealed that the majority of the people would support office development on Asheville Highway, and the majority of the people would support commercial uses on all major streets except Washington Pike and Whittle Springs. Looking at the existing use of the land, you can see the corner contains commercial uses directly across the street. In general, Asheville Highway is a mix of commercial, office, institutional, and undeveloped land with single-family neighborhoods off of side streets for the most part. Looking at street view, you can see Asheville Highway is a pretty heavily traveled road. It's classified as a major arterial, so it's designed to handle heavy traffic. And it's a divided highway, so it's well suited for commercial development. The aerial map shows that there is a neighborhood located to the rear of the property and across Neal's Landing. There is a creek that runs along this northern property line here that divides the subject parcel, including the area to be rezoned from that single-family neighborhood. Looking south, you can see Food City is across the street and some other commercial uses. And then considering that, looking at the general plan, there's some policies recommending locating community-serving commercial areas where they can be easily shared by several neighborhoods. And the surrounding neighborhood, the properties to the north, could benefit from commercial or service-oriented development here. There is a site constraint on the property. You can see here, it's Sinking Creek East is this stream that runs along the property here, crossing under Neal's Landing, which has got some guardrails in place. And then Sinking Creek, without the east, goes north to south here and passes under Asheville Highway. So the creek performs a natural barrier between the property that's to be rezoned and the single-family residential. If the applicant did have plans to cross this creek from this commercially zoned, if it gets approved to this commercially zoned area, they'd have to work with TDEC on that stream crossing. And this is just an image of how the creeks both border the zoning request. And looking at street view, there is a monument sign on the property that would need to be relocated if the rezoning were to be approved. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Now we'll move on to agenda item number 37, and Naomi is going to walk you through this one.
Good afternoon. Bear with me as this is my first time presenting with you. I come before you with agenda item number 37 with Homestead Land Holdings. The address is 8205 Nubbins Ridge Drive. That is located on the northwest side of Nubbins Ridge, Road and west of Wallace Road. It is approximately 1.65 acres in the West City Sector Plan, and it is within the urban growth area. The access is via Nubbin Ridge Drive. It has 20 feet of existing pavement width within a 50-foot right-of-way. The present zoning is RA, low-density residential. They are requesting PR with up to 6 dwelling units per acre. The existing land use is single-family residential. To the north, we have planned residential from 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre. To the south, did it not? Oh, sorry about that. Go back. All right. And so to the south, we have. We have a little bit of a technical difficulty here, but if you bear with me, we'll work through it all together. So to the south, it is agricultural and low-density residential. And to the east, it is planned residential for 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre. To the west is also planned residential for 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre and RA low-density residential. The property is in an area that is primarily single-family residential. and it has been slowly been developed out over the past several decades. So the, if I move over here to the aerial now that we've got this back loaded up, and I zoom in, you can see that there are surrounding single-family residential homes. Oh, still. Okay. And there are concerns with the site distance off of Nubbins Ridge. And for that reason, we are recommending the 4 dwelling units per acre versus the 6 as requested, as it is more in line with the surrounding property areas. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Naomi. Turn over to Mike for the next 3, starting with agenda item number 35.
Okay, hopefully the screen, and the big one will start acting better here. Okay, let me go back here. Sorry, I'm starting off on the wrong number. Okay, number 35, this is rezoning on Hardin Valley Road. They're asking to go from RA, agricultural, and OB. It also has F floodway zone, but that'll stay the same. They're asking to go to CA, general business, and floodway. So they're only rezoning the portion outside of the floodway zone. There's also a plan amendment from office to and stream protection to general commercial and stream protection, which is required to ask for the CA zoning. You'll see that the rezoning case is actually a smaller portion, as I just mentioned. So that's what's highlighted in black, is staying outside of the floodway zone. The sector plan amendment is for the entire parcel. We are recommending, I'm recommending approval with one condition. So just kind of zooming in on the zoning again, because that's kind of the more complex part of this, at least from an existing standpoint. A small portion of the property is zoned OB. That was rezoned a few years back. I want to say it was like 2017 and 2018, 19, somewhere around there. And then it has a small sliver of ag zoning. The back portion of the property, back to the middle of the creek, is zoned F floodway. That will remain the same. Sector plan amendment, the entire property has the office land use. It has part of it has stream protection on it as well. To the east, those properties used to have the office land use classification, and that was changed in 2017, I believe, to GC. Just off the screen, just to the right, is where the Ace Hardware on Hardin Valley is. That was the reason that that property went to GC General Commercial. It is zoned planned commercial right now, but it had the office land use, so in order to allow consideration of the Ace Hardware, the land use plan had to be updated to general commercial. This is an aerial to give you an idea what we're looking at here. The property is predominantly wooded now, the back portion. This is a site that up by Hardin Valley has got a flat spot where the existing house is, and then it just kind of drops off in the back down to the creek. And then on the west side of the property, it's pretty thin and mostly in the floodway zone. So this gives you an idea, a little bit what talking about the F floodway is actually the zone district, which is a little bit hard to see. The next image will be a little bit easier to see. And the FEMA floodway is, it kind of extends out, kind of more jagged here. So let me go back to the next one. And really what I wanted to show here is that the area where it's flat and already disturbed is predominantly outside of the F floodway zone, which it cuts through right here, and the FEMA 500-year flood, which goes up this way. So this is a little bit easier to see. The F floodway zone is here, and the FEMA 500-year flood is here. So the staff recommendation is to approve the CA zoning for the portion outside of the F floodway with the condition that they do no more disturbance inside of the F floodway zone, which is here, and the 500-year flood, which goes to the east, southeast of the existing house. Anybody have any questions?
Why would you limit the disturbance in the 500? I thought the county would allow you to go halfway in between the five. I don't care either way. I'm just
Well,
curious.
it's just such a small property. The area that's buildable, well, it's flat now, I guess let's put it that way, here.
But you could petition to fill. Is that correct,
Good.
Jim? So halfway between the 500 and the,
Halfway between the 100 and the floodway.
yeah. So would you not make the recommendation consistent with what the county would allow you to do, just to at least, I mean, I know it's probably not a pickup truck worth of property, but if somebody's going to go to the extent of trying to develop that, I would assume they'd want to take advantage of.
Yeah, so there's the F floodway zone district, which is the zoning, the actual zone district, not the FEMA floodway. There's limited use of that to begin with. I mean, granted, you can do some parking, I believe, in that zone. It is currently vegetated and relatively steep, so it might be, I don't know, it might be a consideration you'll want to as an option outside of what I'm recommending, going to the no-fill zone instead.
Thank you.
It's just a tough site, and the idea was just to limit disturbance of the steeper slopes as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. It's a tough site, and I would encourage all the other commissioners too, if you hadn't had a chance to look at the public comments, because he did upload some information about what his plans are, and I just found it a very creative use of a challenging piece of property. But I don't disagree with the vice chair about the flood zone, to give him an opportunity to survive.
Yeah, I think he's got some challenges with what he's proposing as well. Okay.
Number 40.
Okay. Going on to item number 40. I just wanted to go over this real quick because we do have one new planning commissioner, and this is a refresher for everybody else. So this one has been postponed since January. Well, it's been on the agenda a couple times since January, but it was tabled and now it's back. So the Beeler Road subdivision, they're requesting 86 detached house lots at 3.11 dwelling units per acre. The planned residential zoning allows up consideration up to 3.3. It's low density residential on the sector plan, so there's no issues there. Just some background context. July 2022, 86 lot subdivision was approved for this property that was mainly attached units. In December 2022, 128 lot subdivision was approved to the east of this property called the Fairview Road subdivision. There was a condition that they had to get access through this property. So that developer worked with the original developer of this property to, I guess, take over the rights and extend the road to the east through this property. I'll explain that again in a little bit more detail. So this current proposal is mainly to extend the proposed road system to the east to allow access for the Fairview Road subdivision. The proposed road network is almost essentially the same as approved back in 2022. The house units have changed from attached units to detached units, but the number of units is pretty close. It's actually the same, 86 detached house lots compared to 86 attached lots. And the recommendation is to approve with conditions. So this is the new Baylor Road subdivision. And, okay, so just some context. Beeler Farm subdivision is just to the north, has 53 units. The Fairview Road subdivision, which I just mentioned, is just to the east. That has yet to be developed, obviously, because it needs access through this property. Then what was formerly called B&B Builders subdivision is this current site. Let me make my arrow and it lays it a little easier to see. So this property is one we're discussing. What was formerly called the B&B Builder site, and now is called the Beeler Road subdivision. I didn't update this number, but that's supposed to be 86 as well, not 87 lots. Okay, so the main revision, this was the previous approval. There was a cul-de-sac right before the creek. This proposal is to extend this road over to the Fairview site, over the creek, has 4 more lots here, where there previously was just common open space. Other changes is the original Beeler or B&B Builder subdivision had, I guess, used an existing pond as an amenity. They had a little trail system that went off the cul-de-sac back to that pond area. Then they also had a trail that went along this detention pond area. And there was also a planning commission condition to extend a pedestrian path over to the property to the southeast. So this proposal eliminates those pedestrian paths and trails. Not that they couldn't be installed in the future, particularly down to the south. I think this property or this trail to the pond is pretty much compromised by this plan. That's probably more limiting in use anyway. Some of the recommendations to note is we are recommending a stub-out connection to the south because it's a fairly substantial property. Plus, with the this has 86 lots, and then the adjacent Fairview Road property to the east has 128 lots, which it goes well over what we would normally want to see 2 access points. Usually around 150 lots is when we want to see at least 2 access points. So the thought is to at least require a stub out in this location because the property to the south has its own frontage on Beeler Road. Eventually, hopefully, we'll get a second access point. The Fairview Road subdivision does have conditions of stub outs as well, as a condition of a stub out to the north and to the south. I think both of those are more challenging to actually get like external road access. It seems like they'd probably be better to, or might be used more for just making the subdivision bigger rather than actually getting access to an external road. But it doesn't mean that they couldn't. There is still that possibility of getting access to an external road through the Fairview Road subdivision. One of the conditions regarding the stub outs is that if we do require a stub out here, one of the 2 stub outs in the Fairview Road subdivision could go away at the option of the developer. There's also a condition of greenway easement, either just to the east of the stream, or they could potentially come in off the cul-de-sac around the detention pond. So that there is a proposed greenway corridor just to the south on Beaver Creek. So because of the proximity to Beaver Creek greenway corridor, it's less than a quarter mile away. This property does fall within the sidewalk ordinance for the county. The ordinance would then require a sidewalk along Beeler Road and on internal roads that have 1,000 trips per day or more. So this main road coming in would hit that threshold of 1,000 trips, as well as this road. So they're showing sidewalks on it in the plan, just as an indication of what the sidewalk ordinance would require. This is just illustrating what I mentioned, that there is a requirement for a stub out to the north in the Fairview Road subdivision and a stub out to the south. That didn't specify exactly where that would have to be. Anybody have any questions?
I do have one question about that. If you can go back to the stub out.
To this
No,
or
on
the next one?
The very last one you showed. Yeah, there. And I'm just looking at you. I guess you said the south side. The topography looks pretty steep there. I mean, is it even
is.
feasible to try to have a stub out there?
think it'd be challenging. This is a pretty wide floodway for Beaver Creek as well. You have a tributary for Beaver Creek that comes on to the north from the north, and then the main channel of Beaver Creek kind of goes off to the east here. So I think it would be challenging, personally.
Yeah, just from a design standpoint, I think it would be very challenging. So I guess my question is, should we try to force it and require it when it's not really feasibly done?
So this is in the Fairview Road subdivision. So these two are already technically required by the previous approval. With this approval, if it's approved as recommended, this new stub out to the south would be, very on plane with the adjacent property, and then the developer could choose to eliminate one of these two stub outs.
We'll move on to our last one, which is item number 46, Holston Springs.
Okay, so this is an after-the-fact approval for a rural retreat. They've been operating already. They do have notice of violation. They did have neighbors complain. So just want to make sure you're aware of that, because you might hear, I'm not sure if anyone has signed up to attend the meeting yet or not, but this did become an agenda item because of an enforcement issue. So this is, the image here is exactly what you see. This is what they're going to use as their event facility. They already have parking set up for the most part. Everything's gravel. They come off of McCubbins Road. They do need to still verify their site distance, because they might be short on site distance on McCubbins. And there's two other issues. So recommendations of approval are pretty straightforward, except for one of them, which is any rural retreat area within 200 feet, within the 200-foot setback of an external boundary. I guess you can't have, basically, they can get a neighbor to sign a waiver to reduce that 200-foot setback. Sorry, I didn't really finish my thought when I was making this bullet point. Any rural retreat use area within 200 feet of a setback or a external boundary of the property requires a waiver from the adjacent property owner before the planning commission can approve a reduction of that peripheral setback, the use area setback. They have not obtained those waivers yet. I understand one of the neighbors may not be interested in providing that waiver. And really, it's not for the event center. The event center is fine, and I'll show you. So in this, the blue lines here are the 200-foot peripheral setback or use area setback. There's two glamping sites on the property that are well within that 200-foot setback, and there's also an existing house that they use for the facility that's within that 200-foot setback. So this review and approval is purely just for the event center, not for those other structures. If they do obtain those waivers, they can come back to the planning commission and request those to be added to the rural retreat. But as of right now, they just don't have the waivers, and they need to move forward with at least the facility.
Mike, the house on the front, if they wanted to use that for an office or for any function or whatever, obviously that abuts a road right away. Would you, who would you get to agree?
Yeah.
The people across the street? Or
Yeah, there was an early on rural retreat on Keller Bend that had a similar situation. They wanted to use an existing house near the road. You use it for changing areas for brides and such.
yeah, my daughter got married there. That's
okay, so
exactly
yeah.
what they did.
In that case, the 200-foot and 300. There was actually a 300-foot buffer too. That's a little bit different, but it doesn't. The 300-foot buffer doesn't apply to how this property sits in relation to other structures on other properties. But anyway, that buffer did did apply across the street. Therefore, they couldn't include that as part of their rural retreat officially. So same thing will apply here. There's really not any existing structures anywhere near this one. If they can, that might be a neighbor who would be willing to give them a waiver. It's kind of an odd situation because if they did not include it as part of the rural retreat, they could still rent the house out. It's not part of the rural retreat. The glamping is a little bit different. That's considered a campsite. Campsites aren't allowed in the ag zone. This property is zone ag, so they would have to, if they do not get the glamping approved as part of the rural retreat, they would have to seek a rezoning. Anybody have any questions?
Mike, I have an email that came in while you were talking that the neighbors are in opposition to the glamping within the 200 feet, so
Yeah,
they're
I saw
not
that.
willing to sign the waiver.
Yeah. Did you hear that? Or- Okay, so what Steve said was that there was an email that came in not long ago that the neighbors, one of the neighbors to the west of the glamping site was not willing to sign a waiver for the glamping. So it's probably going to be challenging for them to include that as part of the rural retreat.
Thank you, Mike. That concludes what we have identified to discuss with you all today. Is there anything else that you all would like to talk about before we conclude?
Yeah, I've got one. I don't want Miles to think we get done early. Can we look at number 17 real quick? I think it's Miss Hillman's. I guess I just wanted to clarify around it, I guess. Do we know why it was MDR sector plan? And I guess that's basically what I want to know, why it might have been MDR. And then, I mean, it kind of looks to me like kind of one of the spot zonings that we've talked about going from CG2 to CG1. Just wanted to draw attention to that.
Pull up the map here. Yeah, this one is an interesting case. It was part of a former planned district tied to the apartment development to the north. And in that plan that was approved as part of that district, it was approved for commercial uses, even though the overall land use maintained the MDR. And part of the reason why we are recommending approval of CG1 is based on the actual build-out of the adjacent parcel, which is also more in conformance with CG1 in terms of dimensional standards, with setback, build-to zone, and with the original plan that was approved back in the 90s, I think, which shows, a design that is not in conformance with CG2 also. So that was part of the basis for recommending approval.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you all. We'll see you on Thursday.